empty right now.
We have to kill her!
No, this is all the toxin we have. We cannot waste it. Come on.
After a really long wait, The Tomorrow War 2 is finally inching forward on Amazon Prime Video, and fans who enjoyed the first movie can finally start getting excited. The original film dropped back in 2021 and starred Chris Pratt as Dan Forrester, a high school biology teacher who also happened to be an Iraq War veteran. The movie kicked off when soldiers from the future showed up in the present, warning humanity about a devastating alien invasion coming in the year 2048. Dan ended up traveling through time to fight alongside others and eventually led a mission that wrapped up with him killing the terrifying White Spike Queen. He didn't do it alone, though. He got help from his estranged father, James, played by J.K. Simmons, and a fellow draftee named Charlie, played by Sam Richardson. Even though critics gave The Tomorrow War mixed reviews, the story itself hinted at a much bigger sci-fi universe that hadn't been fully explored yet. Because the first film ended on a note that suggested there was more going on with the White Spikes than just mindless destruction, a sequel always felt possible. People speculated that the next installment could explore where these aliens came from and maybe even take the action into space. But after the sequel was announced, everything went really quiet. It almost seemed like the project had completely stalled. So when fresh updates finally arrived, it was a big deal, and now The Tomorrow War 2 looks like it's truly happening. The biggest news so far is that the sequel script is officially complete. Zach Dean, who wrote the first film, came back to work on the follow-up, and he's been dropping hints that things are moving along. Back in October 2024, he admitted the writing process was still underway. But then, in February 2025, Dean revealed that he had finished the script and confidently said, "It's happening, and it's happening relatively soon." For fans, that was a pleasant surprise because most assumed the movie was still stuck in development limbo. Now, Amazon Prime Video hasn't exactly been open about every little detail. The studio has kept quiet about where the sequel stands, which leaves people guessing. But Dean's comments made it sound like cameras could start rolling sooner rather than later. He didn't provide exact dates or insider updates, but the confidence in his tone suggested he knows much more than he's allowed to share publicly. That sort of thing often means plans are being finalized behind the scenes. Dean also talked a little about Chris Pratt's character, saying it's easy for audiences to connect with Dan Forrester because Pratt mixes humor with real emotional depth. He mentioned the sequel would explore some of the same themes as the first film, but it would take them in a slightly darker direction. That tease alone has left fans wondering how different this new story might feel compared to the original. It's worth remembering that The Tomorrow War 2 was technically announced way back in 2021, right after the first movie debuted. Given how massive Netflix's film lineup is and how big streaming platforms are willing to go with their budgets, it wasn't shocking that Amazon greenlit a sequel almost immediately. Director Chris McKay, who handled the first film, and Chris Pratt were both in talks to return, along with a handful of other cast members. But despite that early momentum, nothing really happened for years. The project just sat there, leaving fans with no updates. Things only started to look real again when Dean came forward with the finished script in early 2025. Even then, Amazon itself hasn't officially confirmed filming dates or production details, which still makes the sequel status a little murky. So, although fans finally have reason to be hopeful, it's not quite the same as seeing cameras rolling on set. When it comes to the cast, the early word was that most of the original stars would be back. Obviously, Chris Pratt is the biggest name attached, and it's safe to assume he'll return as Dan Forrester. J.K. Simmons is also expected to be back as Dan's father, James. Sam Richardson, who played the lovable and funny Charlie, was also in talks to reprise his role. Betty Gilpin, who played Dan's wife Emmy, was another name floated around for the sequel. And since the first film featured Yvonne Strahovski as Dan's grown-up daughter Muri, she'll probably return too. Edwin Hodge, who played Dorian, one of the more hardened draftees, could also make a comeback. So, all signs point to a pretty full reunion of the first film's key cast. If all of them return, the sequel will have the same strong mix of emotional beats, humor, and intensity that fans connected with the first time around. Story-wise, things are still under wraps. Chris McKay, the director, has teased that the sequel might focus more heavily on the White Spikes and their origins. Back in 2021, not long after the first film dropped, he mentioned that he and the creative team had spent a lot of time designing the aliens and coming up with their backstory. They even discussed questions like where the creatures came from, how they were raised, and whether they were being used for some larger purpose. McKay seemed excited by the idea of building out that world, and he suggested that a sequel, or even a prequel, could dive deeper into those elements. What makes that intriguing is the time travel angle. Because time travel was such a huge part of the first film, the sequel has endless possibilities for where the story could go. McKay hinted that exploring the aliens' homeworld could make for a really fun and unique direction. That would be a big change from the first film, which was mostly set on Earth and focused on the human fight for survival. By shifting the lens onto the White Spikes world, the sequel could deliver a fresh perspective while still keeping the stakes high for the human characters. Of course, with most of the main cast expected back, the story can't only be about the aliens. The sequel still needs to highlight Dan, his family, and the other survivors. Zach Dean has said the new story hits some of the same beats as the original, but it also ventures into darker territory. That could mean exploring the toll that time travel and alien wars have taken on the characters, or it could suggest a more tragic twist to the plot. Because details are still scarce, fans can only speculate, but one thing is clear. The creative team wants to balance familiar themes with new, bold directions. Although it's been frustratingly slow to get updates, there's also a silver lining to this long wait. Taking years to develop a script often means the writers and producers are being careful, making sure the story actually makes sense and has emotional weight. The first film leaned heavily on action and big spectacle, which worked for some people but left others feeling it was a little thin on character development. So if the sequel really is darker and more focused on exploring the aliens' purpose, it could end up being a stronger movie overall. Another reason the sequel matters is because Amazon Prime Video clearly sees potential in building big-budget franchises to compete with other streaming giants. The Tomorrow War was one of their first really huge original films, so making a sequel is also about proving they can sustain a franchise that audiences will return to. If The Tomorrow War 2 does well, it could open the door for more films in this universe, or even spin-offs that dig deeper into side characters or alien lore. For now, though, everything rests on the sequel officially moving into production. Fans have been patient for almost 4 years, and even though the news of a finished script is exciting, they'll only really believe it when trailers drop and release dates are announced. The gap between announcement and action has been long, but the buzz surrounding the new updates shows that people still care about this story. So to sum it all up, The Tomorrow War 2 is closer than it's ever been to becoming reality. The script is finished. Chris Pratt and the other original cast members are likely coming back, and the story seems set to explore the aliens more deeply while also delivering a darker tone. Although Amazon hasn't confirmed filming yet, the fact that Zach Dean sounds confident suggests things are definitely moving behind the scenes. After such a long silence, that's enough to make fans hopeful again. Well, that's it for today. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, because we'll be covering more updates on this soon and other exciting upcoming movies and series. We'll see you next time.